Those tall ships really were magnificent, weren't they? And I suppose it's hard to remember on a cool autumn day like this on a relatively quiet quayside those 5 days back in the summer of 1986, which really were the highlight, I think, on the River Tyne. The days when more than 70 tall ships were berthed alongside the Tyne, when the area was teeming with thousands of visitors and plenty of activity. So let's take our mind back. July 1986, the 5 days when the River Tyne was the focal point of activity in the north of England. Newcastle was chosen as the starting point of the Cutty Sark Tall Ships race by the organisers, the Sail Training Association, and it turned out to be a masterstroke. Newcastle City Council set to work preparing not just for all the ships from many parts of Europe, but for around 3,500 sailors, most of them teenagers, and they expected a few interested spectators. But what happened exceeded even their most optimistic estimates. It's reckoned that over the week, almost 2 million people were either on the quayside looking at the ships or lining the banks of the river, watching the parade of sail. Undoubtedly, the stars of the week were 3 of the tallest sailing ships in the world. From Russia, the giant Krusenstern, a 4-masted bark standing 176 feet at its height above the waterline, and the white-hulled Sedov, carrying, like its Soviet counterpart, a crew of more than 250. And probably one of the finest sights, the beautiful Darmo Jersey, launched just 5 years ago in Poland, the money raised by the country's young people. Translated, Darmo Jersey means the gift of youth. Those of us who saw these vessels will never forget them. It was quite a memorable week too for the Northern Life team. There was so much to cover, so much to see, so much going on, and so much to try and fit into our programmes. As I said, it was quite a week.
Day 1 of the tall ships race, and already problems. Captain Alan Smith, the Tyne harbour master, had berthed 2 Russian ships alongside each other, sharing services like water. But the sail widths are too wide, so another berth had to be found. The knock-on effect means more complications. It's the first big challenge, the first headache, and Captain Smith can't even contact the Russians by ship-to-shore radio yet.
Russian sailing vessels set off, Russian sailing vessels set off. This is Tyne Harbour Radio, Tyne Harbour Radio.
Captain Smith has been in seagoing work for 37 years, and this will be his most concentrated effort, getting 85 sailing vessels into the Tyne whilst keeping the river operational as a commercial port.
It's not a problem that we don't have to deal with every day, but on this particular occasion it's just multiplied by 80-odd times, and we have 80-odd vessels to get in and to moor up safely.
Smaller vessels slipped quietly into the Tyne this afternoon. Tomorrow at least 30 will be jockeying for position. But Captain Smith says he'll sleep well tonight, confident his plans will make Tyneside home sweet home for the floating village.
The Guildhall, Newcastle, nerve centre for the tall ships race. Staff here will be working round the clock, providing a backup service for the fleet of ships and more than 2,000 crew members. It's a joint effort by the City Council and the Sail Training Association. Such is the scale of the operation that extra phone lines have been brought in and a computer to help with the mass of arrangements. There's even a sorting area for the mail that's already started arriving for crew members from around the world. It seems the organisers of the event have thought of everything, but just in case, the master of any vessel can always refer to his captain's manual, specially prepared by the City Council. It tells him where he can do his shopping, gives him a list of doctors and dentists, and even tells him where he can put his rubbish and his sewage.
Well, you could say I'm rather like the umpire of a cricket match. I've got to make sure that the race is run properly and efficiently and nobody cheats, and also to advise on the various procedures and so on in the ports which we're visiting.
So the scene is set for the arrival of the tall ships and the hundreds of crew members who are to win the hearts of Tyneside. The vessels themselves, of course, were fascinating, and when our reporters and camera crews were invited on board some of them, well, we could hardly say no, could we?
8 a.m. in the port of Hartlepool, and the girls are beginning to learn the ropes. There are more than 3 dozen trainees setting sail on the adventure of a lifetime. They've come from all over Britain, most without any sailing experience, let alone knowing how to handle a 300-ton schooner with masts topping 112 feet above the waterline. But the object isn't to turn out yachting experts, it's to develop, in a group from all sorts of social backgrounds, the importance of teamwork and self-discipline when the going gets tough.
The first few days they'll find exceedingly tough, adjusting to the new routines and the lack of sleep and the hard physical work. Then they'll start to understand a little of what's going on the ship, be prepared and understand that they have to work together as a team. And once they've got to that point, then obviously their enjoyment of sailing the vessel increases to the point that after 2 weeks they're very reluctant to leave because they made a lot of friends and are enjoying the life on board. But of course it has to come to an end after 2 weeks.
I suppose the real testing time would come in a storm.
Yes, that really is an experience that not many of them comprehend prior to coming. They may have heard weather forecasts and seen news broadcasts concerning vessels in trouble at sea, but when they actually experience the vessel really rolling over from one side to the other and seas breaking over, it's a frightening experience until they adjust to it and realise that we are quite safe.
The captain heads a team of professional instructors. The Sir Winston Churchill was built 20 years ago, the Sail Training Association's first ship, 135 feet long and a 25-foot beam.
We do sail with the endeavour to win, but it is quite seriously taking part. I mean, I know this is a well-used phrase, but it really is taking part. They will meet lots of young people from a great range of nationalities, and they do get to know them socially as well, and do in fact sail on some of these other vessels. So it is really mixing of youngsters of different nationalities and being part of a very large spectacle.
Today it's calm as she heads towards the Tyne, but the air is tense with excitement as the girls prepare to steer the way hopefully into the history books as winners of the 1986 Seafaring Classic.
Right, steady on that crane right ahead of you.
5:15 a.m. and it's all hands on the deck of the Royalist. They've travelled from Leith, berthed at Blythe, and today's the day they make their entrance into the Tyne. This is the Sea Cadets ship, a square-sailed brig with 33 on board and more than half the crew teenagers from Tyneside. They're all apparently relishing the kind of experience adults call character forming.
Jackie, go to the clew of the topgallant now. Go outboard on the yard.
Most of the teenagers have some limited knowledge of seafaring, picked up through the Sea Cadets and girls' nautical training courses. But they have to learn fast once they're aboard and out at sea.
You have a crew on board who've come from all parts of the United Kingdom. At least half of them will have been away from home for the first time. A high proportion will have never been to sea before. And superimposed on that is the problem of going aloft, which is a challenge in itself. So in the first 48 hours of a normal 6-day cruise, you have this situation of breaking in a new crew, and some of them, of course, are apprehensive about going aloft, but by the end of a week, we normally find that everybody has gone aloft.
All this is supposed to be giving you a sense of responsibility and leadership and self-discipline. Is it doing that?
Well, it's proving that the girls are better than the boys, because the boys will not go at the top. I'm the only one that'll go up from the end. In my watch, all the boys are frightened, so... It's only a forward and they not do it, so I've got to stand on the highest seal and stand up on it, put my hands behind my back, stand at ease, and clip myself on, and I've got to stand there all the way up to the mouth, all the way from the mouth of the Tyne till the dock in a couple of hours.
There's nothing like 2 hours' work before breakfast to build up an appetite. All meals are eaten down below. This is canteen, recreation room and sleeping quarters. I suppose this is the less glamorous side of a life at sea, eh?
Yeah.
Sooner we get finished with it.
It's only 1 day a week, so it's not too bad.
These are your bags?
That's straight,
Can you just lower them so I can see how big they are?
Not very.
Yeah, extremely small. God, I'd hate to be on the bottom one. Some people pay money for this kind of thing, hundreds of pounds, and they call it a holiday. But the really good thing about the Royalist and the other ships in the tall ships race is that you don't have to be a millionaire to take advantage of all the opportunities they offer. In the Royalist case, all you have to do is join the Sea Cadets. There are 12 units on Tyne side and 5 on Tea side. Oh, I wish I hadn't had my breakfast. This was definitely above and beyond the call of duty. But infectious enthusiasm and the sight of the ship in full sail make Royalist memorable. She was the first square rigger built this century. The originals were used as colliers, cargo ships on continental runs, or warships. Two hours after setting sail, Royalist was at the mouth of the Tyne, the crew fed and watered. On a ship that operates like clockwork, even the cheers to the landlubbers are drilled. This is called mechanical waving stations. And so to Newcastle quayside. 3 days of scrubbing the decks, checking the rigging, drills on board, plus sightseeing and socialising with crews from other ships. On Saturday, Royalist will sail in company on the next leg of the tall ships race, in conditions which will be much tougher than the perfect weather we had today.
Everything about the set-off is big. A hull 386 feet long, masts that tower over 200 feet, and 32 sails which stretch over an acre. Yet this magnificent vessel, built in 1921, originally comes from West Germany. The Russians took possession of her after the war. Today she's the property of the Soviet Ministry of Fisheries. Manned by 70 full-time crew, she's a training ship for 150 cadets, on board to learn basic seamanship, ready for careers with a huge Russian fishing fleet. But her very size makes her a comfortable vessel to learn on.
So certainly the life here is much more comfortable than on small vessels, you know, and here cadets have the opportunity not only to study and work, but they have also time for cultural life.
The interior of the Sedov is a far cry from the basic living quarters of many other sailing ships. There's an assembly hall where the crew can enjoy concerts and films, a luxurious reception area to entertain the ship's guests, and a museum highlighting the vessel's 65-year history. She's named after George Sedov, a Russian Arctic explorer. Meanwhile, in the mess, there's an impressive menu for tonight, including, would you believe, steak and chips. It's the Sedov's first ever attempt at the tall ships race, and the crew hope that this, Russia's pride and joy, can sail to victory.
Early morning, and it's time to swab the decks after a night berthed up below. It's hard work, and the weather's taken a turn for the worse. But it would take more than that to dampen the enthusiasm of this young Geordie crew, even before breakfast.
What do you think about it, Paul? Because you've never done anything like this.
Oh, adventure. Good laugh.
You're not at all worried it might be a bit dangerous?
Yeah. Captain reassured it will be all right. Be great, man.
And you have no fear? A fearless Geordie?
Aye.
You're the only all-Geordie crew in the whole race. What do you think about that, Martin?
Well, it's brilliant. But it's just something to look forward to. Everyone's going to be down here watching us, just seeing what's happening.
You feel quite proud of it, then?
They may be novices, but they'll be led by an experienced skipper who's got no doubts about the importance of having a Geordie crew.
Well, I think it's disgusting that there aren't more Geordie people in this race and that Newcastle doesn't, in fact, have boats of its own to send its young people away in this sort of way. I mean, you've got masses of of river frontage here, which other people would give their right arm for. And it's just neglected. And I mean, that land could be made available so that young people could sit down, come down, talk to other people, get a wider view on life, and then actually work on boats and be taught skills.
You've got a lot of confidence. Where do you think you'll come in the race?
We're not racing. We're part of an SDA event, but we're not racing.
No, actually, you've got no time to beat or anything?
No, well, I don't think most people in this consider it as a race. They consider it as an exercise where you can get young people from all over Europe and sometimes further afield who get together, understand that they're all people. And no matter where they come from, they're all really here just to live their life and enjoy it peacefully and happily, sometimes a little roughly at sea, but that's what it's all about.
Great Britain, too, one of the fastest ships in the event. The sleek ocean racer, capable of speeds of up to 20 knots, is a very different sight from her competitors tied up along the river. She sailed round the world 5 times and was once Shea Blythe's yacht, winning the Whitbread race back in 1973. But for the tall ships, she's being crewed by 20 men and women from the Royal Naval Reserve, volunteers who give up their spare time for the Navy. The crew, all from London, have raised more than £17,000 to take part in the event and charter the yacht from a private owner. It's the first time the Reserve has competed in the tall ships race, and the Wrens on board have never put to sea before.
That's right. Traditionally, we're not allowed to. Women did go to sea prior to Nelson's day, which accounts for a lot of the phrases that are still in use today, but he stamped it out.
What is it about the life at sea that sort of appeals to you, that lets you give up so much time?
It's fun. It's simply that.
I mean, you're all in very close confines. You're out at sea for weeks at a time. Do you all manage to get on pretty well?
Pretty well, yes. So, of course, there are times when people get ratty, but most of the time, it's jolly good fun.
Is it all sort of fairly easygoing atmosphere?
Oh, yes, a great sense of humour and masses of sexual innuendo.
As I went down the Bowery one evening in July, I met a maid what asked me trade on a sailor jack says, oh, hey, and away, yes, Auntie, my dear Annie, how ya New Yorkers started on polka. To Tiffany's I took her, I did not spare expense. I bought her 2 gold earrings, they cost me 50 cents, and away, yes, Auntie, my dear Annie, how ya New Yorkers started on the polka. Said she, you long-Jew sailor, now take me home, you may. But when we reached her cottage door, these words to me she did say, hey, oh, my flash man, he's a Yankee, with his hair cut short behind. He wears a pair of long-knee boots and he sails on the Black Bull line, and away, yes, Auntie, my dear Annie, how ya New Yorkers started on the polka. He's homeward bound this evening, and with me he will stay. So get along, ya sailor Jack, get cracking on your way, and away, yes, Auntie, my dear Annie, how ya New Yorkers started on the polka. I drew me glad rags round me, and till the dogs did steer. I'll never mess no more with girls, I'll stick to rum and beer, and away, yes, Auntie, my dear Annie, how ya New Yorkers started on the polka. I joined a Yankee bloodboat and I sailed away next morn. I'll never mess no more with girls, I'm safe around Cape Horn, and away, yes, Auntie, my dear Annie, how ya New Yorkers started on the polka. How ya New Yorkers started on the polka. That's Moriarty's the ventriloquist, you see. Costs an awful lot of money to keep him in rum.
In 4 days, 71 square riggers had converged upriver and occupied their moorings. Within hours, many of the foreign crews had settled into a Geordie environment as though it were their home port. Among the crowds, numbered at more than 500,000 after the second day, several were more than mere sightseers. Kay Quinn, for instance, recalled the days she had been taken to sea by her father, the captain of a four-master.
Thank you.
She was an honoured and impressed visitor aboard the Russian Leviathan, the Krusenstern.
I'd like to meet you on board the house, sir.
It's very nice to be on board. It's quite unbelievable because it was over 70 years ago and the conditions were very, very different. There was no luxury. And the food was appalling because, of course, there was no fresh food, no fridges or anything like that. The ration of water was 1 gallon per day, and that had to suffice for everything needed, washing clothes, drinking. All the cooking was done with seawater, the baking of bread and such like. Very mixed crew, and you can possibly imagine what they were like in those days. They were the roughest of the rough.
Do you like our ship?
Oh, yes, it's marvelous.
Do you like our sails?
Absolutely marvelous. It's difficult to believe one is on a ship.
Yes, I know.
I'm amazed when I see a telephone.
Yes, certainly.
There were no telephones, there were no televisions.
Today, Kay Quinn was confronted by her remarkable childhood, when crews pitted their wits against the elements, trusting to luck, navigating by stars and sextant through the oceans of the world.
Oh, yes. It's a very, very moving experience, really, to come back after all these years. But very enjoyable.
Then there was Alf Jarvis, now headed for Cape Horn. He began his maritime career as a young Australian more than 50 years ago. He got himself a lift as a scratch crew member as far as the continent on board the Polish schooner Zawisza Czarne.
So I turned to this morning, 6:30, and I was a spud barber on the deck there, half a bag of spuds, and there's about 6 cadets around and myself, and we're all peeling spuds. Not most unusual for me, but you got to do, be part of the crew and get in it.
The Poles probably generated the greatest exuberance this week, making friends with everyone and renewing national ties in a trip to meet Polish exiles living in Newcastle.
We are from Darmozierze, it's a Polish ship, and I think that this ship will be win in these races, you know, because the English beer is the most important beer on the world.
Oh, well said. Very well said.
And all your colleagues agree with you, do they?
Czy wszyscy się zgadzają z tym, co ten kolega powiedział, że świetnie, Newcastle jest świetne piwo.
Heave away, haul away, wish to God you'd never been born. We're bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling things. Heave away, haul away, haul away, you heavy sing. We're bound for South Australia.
The attractions of a life at sea, grogs of rum and duty-free at every port might pall if you were on board the dry Russian ships. When they offer you a drink, they mean mineral water. But the Russians managed to contain their excitement about touring Newcastle breweries. They dutifully trooped round the most modern bottling plant in Europe and exchanged gifts. Appropriately, 2 crystal-engraved glasses to the thirsty Russians, who gave managing director David Stevenson some rather dry reading about their ship. They couldn't help but be impressed by the computer-controlled operation, which churns out 1.5 million pints here every week. That's 700 bottles a minute. Secret sources say some end up behind the Iron Curtain and can be obtained for a ruble or 10. But they're not renamed KG Beer or Newcastle Brownski. What is the name of this?
Biwa.
Do you like it?
Yes.
Yes. Do you drink much in Russia?
No.
No. Vodka?
No.
Choknota? and spasiba. And the rest of you will have to guess what that means. Business was brisk along the quayside, but there was dark talk of profiteering by some of the stallholders. But that's the price of being close to the centre of such a major and momentous event as the tall ships race. So while the crowds paid their pounds, the crews paid attention at the captain's briefing in the Guildhall. Mariners from 12 different nations were here for details of the parade downriver, the race lineup and journey to Bremerhaven in Germany. Just getting them to the river mouth requires enormous organisation. The Guildhall, one of the oldest and most attractive examples of mercantile architecture in Newcastle, stands at the end of a waterfront on which attention has been focused to an extraordinary degree during the tall ships race. Just what sort of place is it that those craft leave behind when the flags and bunting have gone? 10 years ago, the quayside was commercially dead and its buildings waiting to be torn down. Now it's part of an improvement area, a new community, with nearly £50 million from public and private sources spent or committed to turning the place into a smaller version of London's Docklands, making it a residential and recreational area. The foundations of a new quayside have been laid. When this archaeological dig on the original staithes has been completed, a Crown Court will be built and create 400 jobs. There's the conversion of a Victorian warehouse into headquarters for the Live Theatre Company, which opened during this week's Maritime Festival. Flats will soon be constructed in disused offices like those in Prince's Buildings, just beneath Tyne Bridge. And who would have thought 10 years ago, and with demolition about to begin, that a flat like this could be created out of an empty shell of a quayside building? And look out over the symbol of this whole riverside revival. The race has been a fitting culmination of all these efforts to breathe life back into the centre of the city.
If the quayside hadn't seen enough activity and excitement for 1 week, the Cutty Sark Tall Ships Race in Newcastle was to receive the Royal Seal of Approval. For on Friday afternoon, Her Majesty the Queen made time during an official visit to Tyneside to spend almost 1 hour among the crowds by the riverside. She was invited on board the Sir Winston Churchill, the Sail Training Association's own ship, and met captains representing each country taking part in the race.
The girls were highly delighted, and I must admit so was I and my fellow officers and crew.
Without breaking confidences, can you tell me the sort of thing she was interested in?
Well, as far as she was interested in the ships, obviously, and interested in whether the Malcolm Miller and the Sir Winston Churchill, one ship having an all-girl crew and the other ship having an all-boy crew, whether there would be much competition during the race, and I assured her that we do actually try to beat one another. We don't get together on this.
With the Queen herself having enjoyed her time on the quayside, it was evident that the Tall Ships Week was a spectacular success. John Hamilton, the race director.
I'm really glad to say that the ships and the young crews have had a real Geordie welcome and a taste of real Geordie hospitality. The programme for them, the arrangements in every way, the liaison system, everything has been absolutely first class. And to us that's very important because this is the first port of the series of 4 for this Cutty Sark Tall Ships race, and it sends the crews off with their spirits sky high, and that's terrific.
They're certainly going to remember Tyneside, aren't they?
Oh, I think they are, yes. The welcome they've had here has been very good indeed. It's been a busy programme for them too. Some of them are quite exhausted. They'll be going to sea for a rest.
With just hours to go before the parade of sail and hundreds of thousands of people expected to line the banks of the Tyne to see the spectacle, weather conditions were going to play an important part in Saturday's events. Captain Smith, the Tyne Harbour Master, knew exactly what kind of day he wanted.
I want no wind for the vessels to go downriver because they are, even without their sails up, the windage on the rigging is quite considerable. But of course, when they start out in the North Sea, of course, the ships themselves obviously want wind. So we certainly won't both be happy tomorrow because I don't want wind and they do.
Friday night, 18th of July, and Newcastle Quayside is solid with people. An estimated 250,000 visitors soaked up the sights of the illuminated ships, the fun of the fairground, an atmosphere which will live long in the memory, and of course that dazzling firework display.
"9 o'clock Saturday morning, and the crew of Atlantica complete their last-minute preparations. The Swedish youngsters demonstrate how the race is not merely about sailing skills, but also about fostering goodwill and understanding.
It's been really nice, and we've been very well received here. We had a great time, really.
What has been particularly nice about it?
I think all the people and everything arranged here for us.
For sailing, the weather prospects seem fine. For the spectators, it's a little less acceptable. But the crowd potential is enormous, and some have travelled from far and wide.
I come up here nearly about 4 times a year because I do like the people. You're all so kind and all so friendly. I've never met such nice people. They're lovely.
I was stationed just outside Newcastle in the war, and it has changed, as Elsie said, it's changed a terrific amount since then.
But on a day like this, it's coming alive again.
Oh, yes, lovely. Yes, great.
The Tyne is now bustling, and the riverside didn't even witness scenes like these over a century ago, when it was last a major port of call for sailing ships. Many relish the prospect of the financial boost for the region.
We've had hundreds of thousands of people coming into the city along the quayside here. They're bound to have brought money with them and spent money in the city. That's good for employment. In the longer term, I think it also helps with the problem of image that we've got in the rest of the country. And I think getting across the fact that this is an interesting, attractive place with friendly people, a place to visit, a place to come and work in, is going to help the future of the region and the city.
However, a day of great drama and excitement couldn't hide its share of sadness. After such a popular week, farewells had come too quickly. banks of the Tyne, the crowds had gathered everywhere to say goodbye to the biggest entry the tall ships race has ever known. Their smiles and warmth would make sure 1986 on Tyneside would live longest in the memories of the competitors. The Russians displayed their own kind of appreciation. Two Tyne ships, St. Hilda and Midnight Moon, had taken the place of honor at the head of each spectacular flotilla. Each group was to have one of the largest ships, including one of the tallest sailing ships in the world, the magnificent Dame Jersey from Poland. Inevitably, there were delays. The organization was too complex, and the farewells were too sincere for there to be anything else. And so to the start of the race itself, out in the North Sea. The first class was to get underway just 1 hour behind schedule. More than 1 million people had seen the 79 vessels, some of them the most spectacular in the world. And that figure probably didn't take into account the hundreds of small craft, windsurfers, canoes, fishing vessels, yachts and powerboats, which had milled around to get an even closer look. July the 19th was not just another Saturday on Tyneside.